What is up? I'm Sergeant Ballistic, but you guys can call me Brian. Thank you for checking out this video. Today I'm going to be doing my final review of this guy. This is the Tronxy X1 3D printer kit. It is a low cost, anywhere between $110 to $150 kit in a cantilever style using a lots of metal extrusion. And sneak preview, kind of spoiler alert, it prints fairly well, as you can see from this for its price point. But I'm going to get into the details, so let's go. You should note that as of May 14th, 2018, Tronxy is not on the list of GPL compliant companies. This may or may not impact your decision to purchase a printer from them. Check the link in the description to 3dprintergploffenders.com for updates to this. I did notice that Angus from Maker's Muse, since I started doing my video, has also put out a video where he's using this in his $500 makerspace, where his goal is to have the cheapest makerspace he can use. I'll try to have a link to that as well. And I think that kind of speaks to the potential that this printer has. So I already did an unboxing and first impressions kind of build video for this, and I'll have that linked in the description below. But overall, I gotta say, for the price point, it was packed really well. Nothing was overly really damaged or anything like that. I was missing, I think, 2 screws that weren't in the kit. I couldn't find them anywhere, and there were some loose parts. So all of the parts that were in there were pretty well labeled in terms of the hardware. There was a PDF that included all the different parts. And you guys know me, I had to go ahead and null everything out, and I like to do that just because I think it looks cool, and also because it helps me kind of visualize all the different parts and how they will fit together and make sure I have everything before I start. So as I got started with the build, I found that the instructions were pretty good overall. They had really nice descriptive pictures in there. There's also a video that Tronxy has up online on YouTube. I'll have that linked as well. It took me about 4 or 5 hours to put it together, and that was while I was filming and taking a lot of pictures for the purpose of this review. Now, I did run into some problems as I was getting this guy assembled, and I covered them in great detail in the unboxing and assembly video for this. Some more unique problems I had were that my main board was kind of DOA. So I just went ahead and bought one from a local source on eBay in the United States. Got to me in about 5 days. Always test your electronics before you kind of put together the whole kit. It's a really horrible feeling going through the whole build process, taking 4+ hours, and then you get to the end and one of your pieces of electronics, like your motor or your main board, is just broken, or the LCD or something like that. Another kind of unique problem I had that I didn't notice anybody else reporting was that the motors already came with the given coupler or pulleys or gears on them out of the box. So I kind of went ahead and assumed that they had pre-assembled them like they did with the extruder assembly, which I've updated. But that was a bad assumption to make, because once I got it together, I noticed that it just was wonky. The steps per millimeter that were defined in there weren't matching up with the motors, and it turned out I had to swap them around. So another more common problem that I ran into is some binding on the Z-axis, just because the motor mounts, the coupler, the lead screw, and the coupling nuts on this flange or bracket aren't in 100% aligned. Just the tolerances and the clearances aren't great on this printer. There's a couple ways to fix it: bending this bracket, printing a new mount, or adding spacers to the original mounts, or what I ended up doing was just loosening the coupling nut on the back here a tiny bit, and it gave it enough kind of play so that it was able to go up and down under the power of the motor and by hand. The other more common problem that I ran into were on both the Y and kind of the XZ axis, and that's just the clearances for the wheels that go in the slotted aluminum extrusions aren't great. So there was a lot of play. There's not much in this anymore. There's just a tiny bit of wiggle. Down here is a little bit more, but when I first got it, there was a lot of play in this, and basically there's a few ways you can clear that up. You can get some eccentric spacers, which I'm surprised they didn't just put those on here. They're not very expensive. You can also print out some brackets that will basically pull the wheels closer. Use those instead of these spacers, and it'll pull the wheels closer to the extrusion. Or you can just do what I did, which was loosen them, pull the wheels as close as I could by hand, and then tighten them again. that's probably not a good permanent solution. You also don't want to over tighten things because this is acrylic and it could crack. Getting the electronics together was fairly straightforward. There is no power switch on this, which is kind of a downer. I do plan on adding one soon. The SD card is all the way in the back down by the board, so I went ahead and got this adapter and I just kind of routed it out of there and inside of the box, and then I just have it wrapped up on top and stuck there with a piece of double-sided tape. And overall, the electronics aren't too bad. The cable management isn't too big of a problem. I did notice that you definitely need to make sure you need leave enough leaves so that you can go to the top. So maybe while you're doing your cable management and routing everything, have it all the way up. In terms of the construction and kinematics, I gotta say I was pleasantly surprised once I got it all together and got all the kind of play out of it and got the motors on the right axes. It's pretty solid. The V-slot extrusion is actual V-slots, it's not T-slots, and it uses V-slot wheels, so they won't wear out as quickly as some of the other printers, especially less expensive printers that use V-slot wheels on T-slots. And it's really pretty solid. The kinematics in terms of the motor, they all seem to be powerful enough to drive their respective axes after you get them in the right place. The belts I was a little worried about because they're kind of like a cheap plastic material. I do think that they were still reinforced when I cut them, but yeah, they seem to work out pretty well. It was definitely very wise of them to use a Bowden extruder setup, as it takes you know, a lot of the weight off of the axes, but that's pretty common for a cantilever style printer. You don't want that direct drive with the extruder motor and the whole extruder assembly sitting on the print head with the hot end, because it's just added weight that's going to slow it down. So in terms of the overall usability of this guy, it's fairly decent for its price point. There are a couple things that really annoyed me about the printer. One is leveling it. They include these little wing nuts that can be really, I've got big hands, and if you've got this set up in a tight space like you would want for a small printer, it can be hard to get to these and tweak them in the way that you want to in order to get a perfect level. Also, this back one is kind of really hard to get to, even when you have it as far forward as possible. It can just be troublesome, and it's also offset from the rest of them. It's not kind of square in a corner, so you have to adjust it differently in order to level that far corner. It does have a separate control box, which isn't my favorite thing. There's a mod that you can do to put this control box underneath this base. You basically have to 3D print it. You can print it on this machine, but you have to do it in like 3 different parts. But if you have another machine or can use somebody else's, then you get rid of this acrylic box, you put all the electronics directly underneath it, and it gives you a more compact footprint, and you can put stuff like the SD card reader in a more reachable spot. You can also replace the buttons. Filament loading, this was actually the first Bowden extruder I had used, but overall it was pretty easy. Some people do print a little thing to help the filament not rub up against the lead screw. I didn't have any problems with that. It's overall pretty easy to load. Make sure that you install the extruder correctly. I've noticed a lot of people not doing that, and they said it doesn't grip well enough against the filament, and it skips a lot as it's not able to move the filament through. I did notice that it benefits from a slightly higher Z offset than I would initially use. I usually use a 0.1 millimeter feeler gauge in order to level, but I noticed having a slightly larger gap than that helped it not have, I guess, as much back pressure, which helped the extruder not skip as much, and then also turning up the temperature helped out with that as well. In terms of the power, it is a laptop 12 volt 5 amp style power supply that plugs in the back here. And that's a bit of a double-edged sword. It's good because you don't have to mess with mains voltage. Then again, I also think it's a little underpowered. I can tell, you know, the extruder fan turns on immediately when you turn on the machine, and then as soon as you start heating it up, you can hear this start to kind of struggle a little bit more. Adding the second print fan, I think, is definitely putting it under a little bit of strain. And you definitely, if you want to put like a heated bed on this, you're definitely going to need a new power supply, so keep that in mind. But I don't think most people who are looking at this printer are intending to print ABS or anything that requires a heated bed. The bed surface is this interesting kind of fiberglass acrylic material that I hadn't used on any 3D printers. My Monoprice Maker Select Plus has a kind of Buildtech like surface, and a lot of the printers I've used have that, but this is pretty good. It's got a really smooth finish. It's not exactly glass smooth, there's a little bit of a texture you notice, but it's pretty glassy on the bottom of the prints, and I kind of like that compared to the more matte finish that comes on a surface like Buildtech. and you're gonna have to use glue with it because it's not heated and it's not like anything that really helps the print adhere really well. And overall, that's not too big of a deal. It does leave a lot of residue on here. It leaves residue on the bottom of prints, so you got to get used to kind of washing that off. And then, you know, being able to pop this off is really nice because you can go take it, put it under hot water in the sink, and get all the glue that you need to use on this off after you're done with it, so you can apply another layer of glue. It's also flexible, which means that when you have a big print on there with a lot of surface area and it's usually hard to get off, you don't have to go at it with a spatula or anything like that. You can just kind of flex it that way, and peel it off. So overall, pretty pleased with this. You can pick up a few other surfaces if you want. I know a lot of people have started putting glass beds on this. Some people have used stuff like Print Bite or Buildtech in order to, you know, get this so you don't have to use any glue. I've also seen a lot of people do mods with magnets to be able to get rid of the clips, which are a little bit of a pain in the butt, I must admit. They take away some build surface area that you kind of desperately need with a 150 by 150 area build surface, and B, you run the risk of the hot end bumping into them when it's homing, so you have to be careful of that. Just be sure to place your prints in the middle and not have the extruder go too far out, because especially with this guy on it, it will run into the clips when it's homed. So once I got this set up to actually print and turned on, I was surprised at how quiet it is running at full speed with all the motors going. The loudest thing on the machine is definitely this fan. This is the stock 40mm fan, and you can replace that with something like a Noctua, which would be kind of weird because that's like a $13 fan going on a $120 3D printer. It's like a tenth of the price of the 3D printer, but it is an option if you want to use this maybe like in an office or your bedroom if you live in a dorm or something like that. I think it is an option. One of the last things I have to mention is that I really do not like the interface on this version of Repetier. It's got a bunch of stuff like transition screens that I don't really like, and it just seems like it takes it longer to boot up and go between screens and stuff like that. The buttons on this are really horrible. They don't register all the time. Even though you hear an audible click, it just won't move. Also, there's some stuff buried in the menus, stuff like disabling a stepper motor so you can kind of manually level. That's buried super far in, or like 3 or 4 screens in. Stuff like preheating is relatively quick to get to. So as you can see, I've swapped off the original kind of shield on here, or shroud, for the hot end, and I think that this is the biggest downfall of this printer and something I highly recommend you replace. The main problem is that this fan originally goes here and it blows directly onto not only the heat break or the cooling fins on the hot end, like right here, it blows directly onto the bare print block too, and it's already kind of an underpowered PSU, and it's already kind of struggling in terms of having both these fans on here. And when you're blowing cool air directly onto the heating block, then you're just kind of working against yourself. So there's a few things you can do. Some people just go as far as to put a little bit of tape over the front bottom portion so that it won't blow directly on the heating block. Some people use aluminum foil to cover the heating block while it's inside of there, and some people print a little piece to kind of make the air go up and hit these fins instead. I recommend getting a aftermarket shroud and cooling units, especially even if you're not going to get a print fan on there, just because you don't want this blowing on that. I think it had a lot to do with some of the initial kind of quality issues I had, where the under and over extrusion was just going all over the place as it moved up in layers, and I've gotten a lot more consistent layers since kind of swapping this out. I also definitely recommend getting one of these socks to help protect the cooling block just from air in general, and it also helps protect your print. You can easily put on a print fan. This is a 12-volt fan I bought for, I think I got 3 for $12, and there is a port on the board for a print fan, so you can just run it down there. Make sure you have the JST connector on the fan. If not, you can splice it on there and it pops on, and then you can just set it in your slicer to use the print fan. And I definitely noticed it helped a lot with bridging prints early on that like benchies and stuff like that. They had some really big problems with just really saggy and droopy prints, especially because it was under extruding. I needed to turn up the temperature. It was, one way to help it not under extrude so much, but when you do that, you have problems with your bridging sagging a lot more. So another thing that probably contributes to the under extrusion is the length of the Bowden tube as it comes on their stock. I think it was probably about 1.5 times as long as this, and that's completely unnecessary for the length of the travel of the arm. I could probably cut this down another few centimeters and still be okay. But all that said, I was pretty impressed at what this was able to print. I threw a lot of stuff at it, a lot of different types of prints as you can see here, and it was able to print just about everything I did. I did some figures and stuff like this, baby Groot, and you can see the layer lines aren't perfect. The consistency isn't there, but I think I can get this dialed in even more as I spend more time printing with this printer. I did a lots of benchies and other types of benchmarks like the steamboats and stuff like that, and they're really great for helping you dial in where you have too much stringing and you need to dial up retraction, or where your bridging is really bad and stuff like that. And it's interesting moving through some of these prints, the ones that I did earlier on and the ones I've done since I've tuned things. The quality's definitely gone up a ton. And yeah, I've got some Pokemon here. I think this is one of the best prints I have, this Bulbasaur. I've also got some low poly Charmanders. You can see I tried to do about a whole 150 millimeters with this guy, and I had a problem with the nozzle getting stuck on a piece of the print, and it came unloose, and then it kept printing and recovered, but then you've got this like chin beard or stomach beard thing going on there. But yeah, it actually recovered several times from a couple failed prints. I did these guys, which are a kind of flexible print in place dinosaur, and it's already got these joints on there, and for not expecting it to be the most accurate printer, it printed these pretty well. I was a little worried that they might kind of fuse together and or the tolerances would be too loose and they would come apart or break or something like that. But these are fun to kind of give to friends, kids, and things like that. This guy had some pretty rough overhangs and they drooped a little bit. I printed this after I put the fan on there, and it was able to print a lot better. I use support on this, but even when I used support before the print fan, I noticed it was still really loose and droopy, and this is about the best I've had with supports after adding that fan. I definitely think the quality of the prints is going to be a direct function of how much time you're willing to put into tuning this guy and how many mods you're going to want to do. Things like PID auto tuning, tuning the extrusion steps per millimeter, and doing things like tuning your acceleration and retraction are going to help you get a lot better quality. And then doing smart mods. Don't just throw mods on the printer just because everybody else is doing them because it's cool. So overall, in conclusion, I'd say that this is a good little printer. I learned quite a bit about 3D printers in general and how the kinematics work by building a kit. I kind of wanted to get a Prusa a long time ago, but it's a $600 thing. If you kind of just want to get into it and play around and tinker, I think this is definitely a good option. It's not for somebody who expects to just build it and then it works and prints perfect right out of the box. You're gonna have to put some time into it, like I mentioned, tuning things and doing some smart mods in order to get this to print pretty good quality. But I think that's part of the fun, and it's definitely a certain type of person who's going to benefit from this. But as Angus from Makers Muse pointed out, it's a good option for somebody who wants to have a makerspace, maybe for just printing tchotchkes and stuff, or maybe you want to do kind of rapid prototyping, you're into 3D modeling and you just want to see and hold something that you made. So for pros, I like that it doesn't try to do too much. It limits you in terms of the power supply, but it's designed specifically to print PLA. And of course comes in at a fairly low price point for somebody just looking to kind of dip their toes into 3D printing. It's a great printer for tinkerers. The unusual kind of acrylic bed is flexible and comes off to be cleaned and remove prints, which is nice. It's very quiet other than the replaceable or upgradable fan, and overall it's very upgradable, and I think it's overall got a lot of potential. In terms of the cons, however, it's going to take some work to get higher quality prints. There's no stock print fan, there's no heated bed, there's no filament holder. You need glue stick for adhesion, which can be a little bit messy. They made a few bad design decisions in my opinion, like the fan blowing directly on the heating block, and the tolerances and clearances are not great for the X, Y, or the Z. I of course got a bad board, but I can't say how common that is. It's got a fairly small build volume, but that's one of the ways that they're able to keep the prices down. And I think the biggest knock against it is that if you're willing to pay $50 to $80 more than that $120 or $130, you can get a bit of a better machine. Something like the Ender 2 or the Ender 3 are up towards the like $190, $200. The Ender 3 is looking like a really good $200 machine. There's also stuff like the Monoprice Maker Select cantilever style printer. Wanhao makes a DI3 Mini. That's another cantilever style, and those are all around $200. So if you can spare the $200, those all have around the same print area, but some of them come with a heated bed and some of them aren't even kits, they're already pre-built, so that's definitely something to consider. But that is it for this 3D printer review. This is my second 3D printer review. Let me know how you guys thought I did in the description below. Also leave some feedback. What do you think of this printer? What type of printers are you guys looking at? What price range, what brands, and stuff like that? As I kind of get more and more into 3D printing, I'm probably going to be picking up some more. I just actually picked up the CR10 from Creality from GearBest. I actually paid for it myself, and I'm going to be checking that out. So if you have any questions about that printer, let me know in the comments below. Go ahead and give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Give it a thumbs down if you did not, but leave some feedback in the description below. Follow me on social media for more in-depth look at what I have going on behind the scenes, what I'm getting in, where these PC builds stand, and things like that. Thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next video. Peace.